Hello, I'm Don Smith, Executive Director of the West Virginia Press Association. Welcome to West Virginia Press Insight, a weekly look at the issues that will impact all West Virginians. Joining us today is Donald Deak Kersey, Elections Director and Deputy Legal Counsel for Secretary of State Mac Warner. Today, we hope to provide residents with some insight into how the Secretary of State's office is preparing for the implementation of the new voter ID law. Deak, let's talk general awareness first. What does this new law mean for state residents?
Well, Don, what it means is starting January 1st, 2018, when a voter shows up to vote on Election Day or during early voting, they have to show some form of valid identifying document, which is just a fancy phrase for a form of ID. The different forms of ID are written in the code, and we have a card that we're presenting statewide through different stakeholder organizations as well as our office and the county clerk's offices that list all those forms of ID that a voter would have to use on Election Day to vote. Okay.
Now, Deak, behind us is an image, and you can see that's what residents around the state can expect to see through various groups and at the circuit clerk's office, correct? Or county clerk's office?
That's correct, yes.
Which, county clerk or both?
County clerk. It may be at the circuit clerk's office, but we're distributing to the county clerk's offices.
Okay, great. And it has, again, explains the law, and then it goes into the available forms of ID and all the things that are out there.
That's right, and I'd like to mention a few of those if I could.
So,
certainly. The law allows both some photo and non-photo IDs to be used for a voter ID on Election Day. Some of the acceptable forms of non-photo identification include a utility bill, a bank statement, a Medicare card, a TANF card or a SNAP ID card, birth certificate, your voter registration card that you received in the mail after you registered to vote. And there are several other forms of non-photo ID that you can use to vote on Election Day. Some of the photo IDs that are acceptable would be a driver's license, a student ID card, a military ID card with a photograph, concealed carry permit. All those forms of photo identification cards are acceptable as well.
Okay, Deak, I've been voting for longer than I like to admit. I didn't realize that you didn't have to have ID when you went to vote now. I've always had ID and I've always used my driver's license, and I tend to think that most people out there probably do that. Don't most West Virginians have driver's license, and wouldn't that work in most cases?
Yes, and in fact, based on our research, it looks like something like 95% of registered voters have a driver's license. So those who don't have a driver's license would still have a voter registration card that they received in the mail when they registered to vote.
Okay, so if I've been voting and I've been taking I always go and I have my wallet with me, and in my wallet I have my voter ID card and my driver's license. If I have that and I go in, there's no change for me other than the poll worker will ask me to see that ID. Is that right?
That is correct. Now there are a few exceptions to being required to show a voter ID on Election Day. Three main categories. One is if you show up on Election Day and you don't have a valid form of ID, you can come with an adult who's known you for at least 6 months, and that person will sign an affidavit, a sworn statement, that says you are who you say you are, and that adult shows a photo ID, and then you can vote. The other exception would be if you are a resident of a licensed care facility in the state, for example, a retirement home or a nursing facility. If you're a resident at one of those care facilities and your polling place is at one of those care facilities, you don't have to show a form of ID. And the last exception is if you show up to vote and the poll worker knows you, the poll worker has known you for 6 months, you don't have to show ID to vote.
Okay, so my driver's license is good. My hunting, fishing license are good. My bank card is good. If the poll worker knows me, that's good. This really doesn't make it much more difficult to vote.
Not at all, no.
I have been out mowing my grass and said, oh, I got to run down and vote. It's Election Day. And I've got down there and I'm in shorts and a t-shirt and tennis shoes, and I realize I don't have my wallet. And I say, oh, I got to go back. If someone would get in that situation and it's pulled, they can't get back in time, and they come in and they say, I don't have any ID, and no one knows me, can I still vote?
Absolutely.
Will they turn me away?
No. No voter will ever be turned away on Election Day, even after the new voter ID law goes into effect. All you would do in that situation would be the poll worker would have you vote a provisional ballot. And then at that time, there would be 5 days during which the county clerk's office will review your provisional ballot, and your signature on that will be compared to the signature on your voter registration. And if the signatures match, then your vote should be counted. You could also try and prove your residency during that 5-day period prior to canvass by showing up at the county clerk's office and showing them your ID that you forgot, or a utility bill with your name on it, something like that.
Okay. Now, I think the card you guys is putting out is very good. People will see that around. Again, on the front, it has the law explains it. It has the various forms of ID. On the back, it lists the exceptions. It has some frequently asked questions. So tell us a little bit about how people can expect. I know we said the county clerk's office, maybe the circuit clerk's office around the courthouse. Do you have any idea yet other places that will be out there, or you just know that it'll be everybody in every county should see this?
So we have a group of stakeholders that came to our office when we developed this program and have helped us create this card. And what we anticipate is some of those organizations will put these in a mailing. It might be slipped in a utility bill envelope. It may be mailed out to the constituents or handed out in person. There aren't a lot of funds, and there weren't any additional appropriations from the legislature after this law was passed to pay for an education campaign. The Secretary of State's office is charged with paying for that themselves, and the State Election Commission actually approved a small expenditure for these cards. So you can expect them at your county clerk's office most definitely, and as the stakeholder organizations hop on board, the more we have, the more you can expect to see other places throughout the state.
Okay. Now, I think one thing that's a little confusing, maybe not to me, but it could be confusing, is this isn't about proving residence. This is about proving that you're registered,
That's
correct? If you want to vote, just being a West Virginian isn't enough to allow you to vote in an election. You have to be a registered West Virginian to vote in an election. Is that correct?
That's right. And more specifically, the voter ID law is to prove your identification on Election Day. It's a very low threshold to prove. You don't need a photo identification. Just something with your name on it issued by the West Virginia government or U.S. government.
Okay. Okay. Now, in terms of, I'm not registered. I am, but say I'm a person out there saying I'm a West Virginian, I'm not registered, I don't know if I'm registered. How do I get registered? What are the options for me to get registered so I can vote? How do I check to see if I'm registered? And as we were talking before the show, there was a time when I had moved and had registered in 2 different counties and had to change the other. So if they want to check those type of things, how do we go about that? How can you help them with that?
The easiest way to check your registration is online. The Secretary of State's website has an online portal that voters can check their registration. It's ovr.wv.sos.gov. And if you go to that website, you type in your name and your date of birth, and it'll show you where you're registered to vote and where your precinct is. Mm-hmm. And if it looks like it's not the right place, you can change your registration online at that same website. You can also contact your county clerk and get a voter registration application and fill that out to change your address. If you've moved from a different county, you'll have to fill out a new application, a new paper application, in order to update your registration automatically. You could do it online at that website, but you'll still have to show some form of ID before you vote to your county clerk to show the new address in the new county.
Okay. I've got to say this, that in all the times I've had difficulty voting, it's never been that, like I say, there are a couple times I forgot my wallet and I went back and got it because I had my driver's license and I had my voter ID card. But when I have struggled with voting, it is when there's a big crowd. And I don't care if it's a 10% turnout or a 50% turnout, you all want to vote the same time I go. When I get there, there's a line. And let's face it, we get off work at 5, we go to work at 8 or 9. We all try to stop in and do that. So we get there and we look up and say, oh, there's a lot of people here. I'll come back later. And while I don't have any data, I'm willing to say that that's a lot of the reasons registered voters end up missing a chance to vote is because of the line backing up. Now with this law saying, okay, when you come through, you at least have to get your ID out and the clerk has to check it. Are you worried that there will be longer lines and delays?
Yes, especially the first time around. This begins January 1st. I know there are some municipal elections that are happening early January, and this law applies to municipal, county, statewide, federal elections, all elections in the state. So especially for the newer states, or newer counties and cities that are going to have elections before we can really get the word out there, I do anticipate longer lines. Even in the May primary, I anticipate longer lines because we have poll workers that have been working for decades,
right,
that may not be used to checking ID. Our county clerks have a big hurdle to go over to train them, and I think it is to be expected. But there's a way around it. Early voting. Early voting starts 13 days before an election, and it lasts all the way up until 3 days before an election. And early voting's in person, or you can vote absentee if you fall under one of the categories. And the early voting period is 10 days long. It's on Saturday, on both Saturdays before the election. So it's a good opportunity to miss some of those long lines on election day and get out and vote early.
And there's usually one location in the county for early voting, right? If you go and do it in person, you go into the clerk's office and do that?
Right, usually.
Okay.
Some counties have satellite precincts, but the residents in those counties would know where they are. They get notice in the mail.
So, insight I get from this, and I hope our other people do, is first, don't panic. This is a new law, but you can vote. And for the majority of the people, they will notice no change except that the clerk will ask them for ID. And to be honest, and I know I've seen other people online, and I do it, I have my driver's license and my voter card out before I get there. And they may look at it, but I guess they are required to look at it now. So for the majority of people, there won't be a change. There may be a slightly longer line, but now early voting allows us to avoid that. Getting registered is the key. This is about proving you are the person, one, that you are registered and that you are that person. It has nothing to do with West Virginia residency other than you have to be in the right district to vote, correct?
Right, yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
I know that the newspapers of West Virginia will be covering this and putting editorials out and talking about it. We've always pushed for more people to vote in the state. Do you have goals in terms of getting people registered or keeping voter totals up? Or how are you going to gauge your success in this?
I think the county clerks will be the best people to gauge that. They'll know what the lines are like. They'll know what the turnout is like. We have a statewide voter registration system that we monitor, and we can see after an election, as the results come in, what those numbers look like. But really, I think the success in this will be if voters show up on election day with their valid identifying documents prepared to show them to the poll workers and aren't surprised, aren't upset about the new law, and if they don't have one of those documents, that they can call the county clerk's office and get one. They can call our office for information on how to get a valid identifying document. Really just preparing the state for this new law would be a success.
In some ways, if this gets people more interested in being registered, more aware of election regulations, maybe it helps.
Sure, yeah, we can hope.
Let's hope. Well, again, this is Don Smith with West Virginia Press Association Insight. We want to thank Deak for joining us from the Secretary of State's office to talk about the new voter ID law. We hope you've gained some insight. Thank you. Thank you, Deak.
Thank you.